Okay, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Hello, dear teachers. Welcome to this event. You know, this is the year of our 80th anniversary. So on behalf of NUTESA, we welcome you. What we have, Lourdes, we have our NUTESA's Academy of Experts. You know that every month we have an international event with all our partners from the different editorial houses. And what we have for this morning, Lourdes, good morning.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you again, dear teachers. And well, today we have a very interesting topic, project-based learning in ELT, a topic you have been asking us for so many times, and today we have it. Yes. And yes, we have, but first we have some general guidelines. The first one is you have to mute your microphones during the sessions, please. Then you have, well, put your comments in the chat box if you want. You must fill in the link in the chat box for your certificates. And we will send your certificates from June 20th on. Then at the end of the session, you will receive a survey to complete.
Yes, you know that your opinion is really important,
yes,
right? So we can improve our service and to know and to fill the requirements you have. And what is this topic about, Lourdes? Tell us about the topic.
Yes, so project work, you know, has been a part of educational principle and practice in experiential learning for over a century, and has influenced the teaching methodology of many curriculum subjects, including foreign language teaching too. This session will look at one specific area of project work, which is called project-based learning, PBL, and its key features and how they allow us to implement certain aspects into the primary and secondary level classroom to engage learners in more simplified yet effective and meaningful project-based tasks, to extend and enrich, which is important, their learning and 21st century skills.
Yes, a really interesting and important topic, and for sure is going to be a help for you, for your classes, for your students. And who is going to be in charge of this interesting and important topic? Yes,
with an expert.
We have the pleasure. Yes, a friend of us, a friend of NUTESA, a friend of yours. You know him. It's always a pleasure to count on you. We are very proud to have you, Daniel Morris, this morning. Daniel holds a bachelor's degree in Hispanic Studies and a Cambridge CILTA. He has worked as an EFL teacher and British Council language assistant in Spain and the UK. Since joining Express Publishing as an ELT consultant in 2018, he has traveled extensively, delivering academic presentations and teacher training sessions at various international events, including TESOL and IATEFL. And now we have the pleasure to have Daniel this morning with you, with us, with everybody. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you and welcome to this session.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody at NUTESA. And first of all, a very happy anniversary to you. I think this is a very important milestone, the 80 years of the company. So congratulations.
Thank you.
On behalf of Express Publishing as well, I'd like to congratulate our amazing partnership that we've shared over the years, and we're always very happy to come and support you and talk with you, and we really enjoy working with you, and hopefully for at least another 80 more years we can be with you as well.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you so much.
So shall I begin?
Yes,
start?
You can start. The floor is yours.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lourdes and Patricia, for the introduction, and thank you, teachers, for joining me here today, joining us here at this NUTESA event. It's good morning for you, and it's good afternoon from me at the moment. As Patricia and Lourdes explained, I'm going to be talking to you today about project-based learning. It's something that has gained a lot of attention recently. It's not a new topic, as we explained at the beginning. Projects have been around for a very, very long time, but the idea of project-based learning has really become something of a point of interest for teachers recently, as it really combines a lot of different skills. It really helps learners to develop realistic and 21st century orientated skills that they can use in the future. So this is what this presentation is going to be about today. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Okay, so here we go. So yes, project-based learning. So the things that I would like to focus on in today's session, first of all, the difference between projects, simply projects, and project-based learning. From my experience as a teacher and with talking to teachers, there can quite often be some confusion or maybe some doubts about, am I teaching projects? Am I using projects, or am I teaching project-based learning? There's actually a lot of important things that we can distinguish between PBL and project work. So that's one of the things that I want to touch on today, how we can actually recognize project-based learning as an approach, and how we can establish a kind of framework for implementing project-based learning. That's the first thing. The second thing that I want to focus on is another misconception. I think a lot of teachers maybe worry or are concerned that project-based learning can only really be implemented in higher levels, in secondary levels, for example. However, it's actually quite possible to implement project-based learning in the lower levels, in primary. So that's one of the other things I want to touch on today, how we can implement project-based learning in a primary classroom with younger learners. Of course, it requires a bit more care and scaffolding. However, with the right approach, with the right framework, it's something that we can achieve together. So these are my 2 points really today. Okay, so looking at project work and project-based learning and how we can implement it in both the primary and secondary classes. Okay, so before we get into that, let's have a quick brainstorm. I want today to be a bit interactive as well. What types of projects do you do with your students in the classroom? If you want to write in the chat some ideas, I'd really like to know your thoughts. When you think about projects in ELT, what kinds of projects come to your mind? What kinds of projects do you use with your students? Okay, so for example, just to start off for myself, something that I think of is something like craft work, for example, with young learners. In a lot of our course books, Express Publishing course books, of course, we have opportunities for craft work. The students create something and they present it to the class, for example. This is an idea or an example of a project. What kinds of projects have you used before? And please do write your ideas in the chat. Create a comic. That's a great idea from Luth. Very nice. Creating a comic, a writing workshop. Okay, very nice from Odalis. A story. Very nice. What other things? Meaningful ones. That's a very good point, Maria. Whatever kind of projects that we do in the class, it has to have some kind of meaning. Okay, it has to bring together what the students have been learning in the class. That's a very good point. Speaking projects, presentations. Okay, Giovanna, thank you very much. Okay, we can go on and on for a very long time here. And in fact, I think the list of projects can be endless. Here are some examples of some typical projects that we use inside of the class. Things like posters, PowerPoint presentations, for example, students creating leaflets, especially now with online teaching and teaching through Zoom, for example. I think it became a lot more popular for students to create things like videos, for example, very short video presentations that they could present to the class, things like craft work that I mentioned already. And again, with online learning, things like quizzes. For those of you that were using, for example, platforms, things like Moodle, or maybe you were using our Express Digibooks platform during the pandemic, things that allow students to a bit of interactivity, some quizzes, for example, things like ICT research, We mentioned a story or a comic. We can also mention here film reviews and show and tell as well, especially for primary learners. Rather than doing presentations, maybe something a bit more simple, showing something to the class, bringing something to the class and talking about it. These can all be considered as projects. And as we quite rightly pointed out, all of these projects have some kind of meaning for the students. They allow them to work with language in meaningful ways, in productive ways that can engage them on many different levels inside of the class. Okay, so these are some different types of projects that we use. Another question before we begin, a bit more specific this time. What do you think makes a good learning task? Okay, we have 4 points here. A good learning task should, for example, enable learners to use language, practice specific features of the language, maybe some vocabulary, some grammar, for example. Okay, the second point, a good learning task should allow learners to rehearse in class communication skills, maybe some speaking, some writing, things that they're going to need in the real world. Okay, realistic skills here. Point number 3, it should also involve learners in sharing information. Okay, maybe that would be presenting something that they have studied at home or something that they have prepared before the lesson, for example. Okay, and involve them actually presenting something or sharing some knowledge or some skills with the rest of the class. It should also be suitable for mixed ability groups. Okay, I think we can all agree as teachers that good learning tasks should involve all of these different areas. And actually, these are the key features of project-based learning. Project-based learning has all of these different elements involved. This is why it's become so popular. This is why it's seen as a holistic way to engage students in the classes, as it touches on all of these different points with the learners. So what is project-based learning exactly? Project-based learning is a teaching method in which students learn by actively engaging in real-world and personally meaningful projects. Okay, this comes from the Buck Institute of Education. Some key words here in the description. It's an approach that involves active learning. Students are not just passengers in the classroom in project-based learning. They take an active role within the class to prepare something, to engage in some form of inquiry, for example, and some form of discussion or presentation for the rest of the class. Secondly, it's focused on a real-world topic, so everything that students are studying in project-based learning has some kind of real-world connection. Here we can also bring in the 21st century skills, things like creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, and communication, of course. And perhaps most importantly, that project-based learning involves personally meaningful projects. Students here, when they embark on project-based learning, they're making use of personalization, okay? They're taking something and putting it into their own reality for some kind of project work, okay? So these are some of the key features of project-based learning. To be more specific, project-based learning, it involves students doing things like designing, planning, carrying out extended research or project work that ends in something that is publicly demonstrated. Okay, that's one of the key things with project-based learning. Whatever is the end result of the project is something that is demonstrated to an audience. As I'm talking to you now, for example, through Zoom, with a live audience in a realistic setting, this is what the main goal of project-based learning is, for some kind of publicly exhibited output. And that can be any kind of output. And we're going to see a bit later on different types of PBL approaches and different types of output that the learners can produce from this. Okay, now, again, this comes from the Buck Institute of Education. It's a very useful source if you want to look into project-based learning. It gives us some idea about the journey that students take when they follow the project-based learning approach. Compared to simply project work, PBL is actually made up of some very specific features, which is what I'd like to show you right now. First of all, project-based learning always begins with a challenging problem. Okay, it's something that engages the students, challenges them to think of a solution to a problem. Okay, that can be any kind of problem, some kind of issue that is a realistic problem, and that sets the students on a pathway to inquiry. It gets the students continually trying to answer this question through the work that they do in preparing their project. Okay, and very important to this is authenticity. We have a realistic problem. Students are using realistic tools, realistic methods in order to approach this problem. So doing their own research, for example, using a variety of different tools, for example, independent research, computers, the internet, looking through their course books, for example. It involves all of these different authentic tools to help them to address the problem. And at the very center of this, we have student voice and choice. The decisions that students make during this process have an actual result on the outcome. So students are driving this process. They get to decide what the overall product is that they will present at the end. Okay, so more than a teacher directed task, the students have the decision making lies with them during this process. Okay, and of course at the very end, students get to reflect on what they have created, and they have this kind of public product that is presented to the audience. Okay, this is something that has been taken from the Buck Institute of Education. As I mentioned, this is kind of our pathway that students take on. And as I show you some of the more practical examples later on, we can see how these examples fit into this journey and how students go from point A to point B when it comes to project-based learning. Okay, so just a few ideas to keep in mind. What kinds of activities can this involve? For project-based learning, this could be role-playing. Okay, when I talk about role-playing, this isn't just reading out a story, for example. It could be. It can also be students taking on different roles within a group. So within a group, different students are responsible for carrying out different work within that project, for example. So someone or a group of students designing a poster, for example, someone might need to do a bit of research. Another person might need to present, for example, the finished product. And again, in a real world scenario, okay, something that is realistic for the audience. It involves multiple methods of communication. So one project might involve, different kinds of speaking, writing, visual presentations, for example, involve research, comprehension of multiple subjects. Quite often, project-based learning takes ideas from other subjects from across the curriculum. So it might involve some CLIL in some areas at the same time. What else do we have? We have, of course, blended reading and writing genres to produce their project. Students also have to look at a variety of different reading and writing texts, for example, for authentic audiences, and they're bringing in real-world expertise. All of this process involves, as I said, creativity, communication, collaboration, independent research. All of these different skills are going to be useful for our learners in the future, in their job, in higher education, for example. So now that we've kind of defined project-based learning, now that we've looked at some of the theory behind it, let's look at how we can separate projects from PBL. I know this is quite a challenge sometimes for teachers, and it's a very valid concern. Even myself as a teacher, I was not very sure about, am I doing a project right now, or can I actually take this a bit further and do project-based learning? From the graphic that you see in front of you, this is a good way that we can use to separate PBL from projects. So first of all, PBL is always a collaborative effort. Okay, it's something that always involves groups of students. PBL cannot really be done individually, whereas projects, they can be collaborative. Don't get me wrong, they can involve a group of students. However, quite often projects can be individual as well. PBL always involves collaboration between students. That is the very core of PBL. The second point with PBL, as I mentioned already, it involves student voice and choice. So it's more student directed. In PBL, the students are making their own decisions about how they approach the project and about what they actually exhibit to the public at the end. Whereas projects, again, we can argue, are quite often more teacher directed. Maybe the teacher asks the students to prepare something specific on a specific topic, for example. With PBL, we have a bit more flexibility. We have a bit more autonomy. for the students. Whereas projects normally occur after learning. You can see in many of our Express Publishing books, for example, at the end of a module, we normally have some kind of project that brings together everything that the learners have been studying. And this is something you can find in most modern course books. With PBL, this occurs while the students are learning. It's an ongoing process from start to finish. Students are learning about different things as they finish their project, as they work on their project as a team together. Whereas projects normally have the same goal. We have a whole class, maybe in the class, everyone has to design a poster, for example, just as a very rough example. The teacher knows they're going to receive all the posters at the end. With PBL, again, it's students' choice. How they approach this is different. They might want to do a poster, they might turn that into a video or a presentation, for example. Whereas projects not normally have a real world relevance. They can sometimes, of course. PBL is always based on real world situations. It's always something that can be taken from everyday life and something that is going to involve realistic skills at the same time. And with projects, normally these are submitted to the teacher. Okay, at the end, when students have created their poster, it's given to the teacher. As I mentioned before, PBL is something that is publicly presented to an audience. That can be the whole class, it can be the whole school, it can be the teachers, for example. Two things I'd like you to keep in mind that really help us to separate projects from PBL. Projects, it's all about the product. It's all about the poster, the presentation, whatever is asked. With PBL, it's all about the process. It's all about the learning that takes place by the students as they prepare their project work. Okay, so this is what we can use to distinguish projects and PBL. And just for a bit of fun now, I thought I would like to help us to understand projects and PBL a little bit more in detail. We have some examples here from our primary books. I'd like you to, in the chat, have a look at the examples. We've got exercise 5 at the top and exercise 4 at the bottom. What do you think this example is? Is it a project or is it PBL? What do you think? So let's start with exercise 5. We're finding information about an unusual shopping center from around the world, and we present it to the class. Do you think this is PBL or a project? What do you think? Any ideas? Don't be shy. It's okay to get it wrong the first time. It doesn't matter. Do you think we're doing project work or PBL here? Perhaps we can look at it together. If we look at exercise 5, okay, we're finding information about an unusual shopping center. Okay, we're presenting it to the class. It can be a public presentation there because you're presenting it to the whole class. In the chat, a lot of projects there. Yes, here is an example of project. Why is it a project? Because through finding information, it's something that's Googleable. Okay, one of the key features of PBL is that students are finding out their own information. Okay, the topic of a PBL task should be ungoogleable. Okay, it's not something that we just find pictures and show the rest of the class. This is something that we would contribute to a project. Okay, but not something that we would use for PBL. So in the first example, okay, we would see a project. Okay, in the second example, though, we have here the students have a shop in groups. Okay, so it's a collaborative task. They've got a shop. It's a realistic situation. Decide what kind of shop you've got. Okay, we've got some student choice here. They get to decide what they have in their shop, what they're going to sell. What are their special offers? What kind of products do they have? Present them to the class. What do you think this is, a project or PBL? Okay, so Alicia and Odalis, Giovanna, PBL. Yes, so here we have a great example of PBL. And you can see here the methodology behind this. The students have more freedom. They are learning as they go. They are taking something realistic. They have their own shop and they're getting to decide what kind of products they have on offer, and they're presenting them to the class as well. So this is a great example of PBL. Okay, so this is how we can differentiate between project work and PBL. We can always kind of ask ourselves these questions. Is it realistic? Is it collaborative? Are the students making decisions about the learning, for example? And this is how we can try and understand, perhaps in better detail, project work and PBL. Here is another example from one of our primary series again. Okay. Let me know in the chat. Have a look at the examples. Let me know in the chat if you think it's project work or PBL. Okay, so the first one is a project, we think. What about the second one? You think this is a project or PBL? PBL. Okay, so let's have a look together. So we've got some split comments, 2 PBL, 1 project, 2 projects. What do we think? So let's have a look at them together. In the first one, okay, again, we're finding and drawing pictures of hats, okay, and then we're presenting it to the class. Is this PBL? Maybe not so much. We haven't really got a realistic situation here. Okay, finding a hat, okay, but it's not a realistic situation that allows students to make decisions. Okay, and at the same time, it's not a collaborative task. This can be done individually, for example. So for the first one, we would actually say this one's more of a project, actually. And the second one, we do have a realistic situation here. We're going on hiking in the forest, design a hat for yourself. Is that realistic? Okay, it can be to a point. Present your hat to the class. This isn't a collaborative task either. So both here would be projects. Okay, we haven't really got a lot of decision here. Okay, you can design the hat for yourself, but there's not a lot of inquiry. There's not a lot of research going into this. So these two, we can say, are more towards project work than PBL. Okay, that's not to say we can't adapt these to make them PBL. If you wanted to make this PBL, for example, you could perhaps make it a more collaborative task. Okay, you could maybe get the students to decide what they're going to do when they're hiking in the forest, for example, design some kind of a schedule. This would be more PBL than project, okay? Here we have one more, this time from secondary. I thought I'd take from both, from primary and secondary. So in secondary, the first one, I think now we have more of an understanding of how it is. Do you think the first one is project work or PBL? So imagine you work for a company that creates apps. Think of an augmented reality app. What is the app called? What is it going to do? Why are people going to buy it? Write a description, present your app to the class. What do you think this would be, a project or PBL? So this one is more towards PBL, the first one. Why is it more towards PBL? Again, we have this same kind of thing. It's a realistic situation, okay? You're working for a company. This company creates apps. You need to think about what kind of app you want to develop. What's it called? The students are deciding all of this. The teacher isn't giving them any extra information here. The decision-making is purely with the students. At the same time, they're going to present the app to the class in some kind of public demonstration. So for this reason, this is more towards PBL, okay? Throughout this, this kind of process, the students can do some research, they can create their own materials, and they're going to end up with some kind of public presentation. The second one doesn't really mention anything about public presentation. It can be an individual task as well. So this one is more towards projects. A bit later on, I'm going to show us how we can extend this project into a PBL. As I mentioned, just because it's a project doesn't mean it can't become PBL. We just need to take the right approach when we do that. So just a few examples, just to highlight here the differences between PBL and projects. Okay, so how can we actually teach through PBL? Now that we know some of the theory, now that we've distinguished it from project, how can we teach sufficiently, effectively using PBL? This comes from the Buck Institute again, very, very useful source of information when it comes to PBL. Everything about the framework, the features of PBL, very useful information here for teachers if they want to, or if you want to engage with PBL in your class. So what we have here are different steps that we take when we introduce a PBL task, when we engage students with this task, and also how we can manage them and assess them in the right way. It begins, first of all, with building the culture. When I say build the culture, this means simply to introduce the topic, provide some kind of background. This is essential. This is very important, especially with primary learners. They need a bit more support. They need a bit more scaffolding. So when we're building a culture, we are introducing the topic in a way that is a way that the students can connect with, a way that they can understand the topic. Next comes the designing and planning stage. So how are you going to approach this project? Okay, what kind of steps do you need to take? I'm going to talk about this a bit later, so I'm just giving you an overview right now. The third bit is engagement and coaching. So the role of the teacher. What role do you take in the class with the students? How can you engage the students? How can you coach them and be like the facilitator inside the classroom? How can you guide them through the exercises, but at the same time not decide everything for the students? Give them some kind of freedom. At the same time, we also need to consider scaffolding. Okay, how do we also, of course, we're teaching language at the same time. So how do we make sure that students are also focused on language, grammar, for example, on skills? How do we scaffold the learning so that students are also developing their linguistic skills at the same time? How can we manage activities? So how do we make sure that the groups are working effectively? And how can we ultimately assess what students have done? Okay, it's all the pieces of the puzzle that make up our project-based learning approach. Okay, so what I'd like to do, I'd like to use some examples today. I want to focus more on the methodology than the materials. Okay, I've taken the material today from one of our primary series. However, what's really important is the methodology. Okay, so I really want to make here the focus, the methodology. So what we have here is a project. It's a recycling day project that the students are going to prepare. Okay, we can see that in this project, the students are going to take on different roles in different teams. You can see we have a team of advertisers for the event. We have a team that are going to be creating the boxes, the recycling boxes for the school. And we also have a documentary team as well, a team of students that are going to be filming the event. And also we have at the top there, we have another group of students. My bar is in the way. The informers, of course, these are going to be actually advertising or the event, informing people about the event as well. So we have different groups of students that are going to be working in different groups here. And their main goal, their joint goal, is to organize this recycling day event. Okay, so a lot of different work there for the students. Let's see how we can approach this with a PBL approach. Okay, so first of all, we need to build a culture. Before we dive straight into the project, okay, before the students get excited, we need to present the actual idea of the project itself. What kind of event do we have? What is the idea behind the event? It's all about recycling. It's all about looking after the school. And how do we put this in a realistic context? We ask the students to think about their own school. What things do we recycle? Are there recycling points in my neighborhood or in my school? And we can talk about it a little bit. So we're already presenting the students with the challenging problem, making it realistic and personalized. They're thinking about their own school and then how they can actually promote recycling in their school. Okay, so this is a nice way to build the culture, get the students interested in this idea so that they can start carrying out their research and prepare their projects accordingly. Okay, the next stage, we go into the designing and planning. Okay, here is where the teacher's books can really help us. They give us a lot of useful information, guides. So based on students' interests and talents and skills, we can put the students into groups. Okay, it says here in the exercise, the teacher will put the students into the 4 groups, depending on their different skills. So you may have students in your class that are quite creative. Perhaps these will be the ones that will create the poster for the event. You may have students in the class that are very good with technology. They like making videos and doing speaking and things like that. Maybe they will be part of the documentary team. that is following this kind of event. Okay, so as the teacher, of course, we know our students better than anyone. We know the different learning styles. We know the strengths of our students. This can be a good opportunity to put the students in different groups, in groups that you know that they're going to work towards their kind of interests and skills. Okay, so this will be the second step, designing and planning how you're going to approach the task in groups based on different skill levels. Okay, then managing activities. So the next important thing, of course, is to sit down with each group and make sure that they understand what their role is and what they need to do and what they need to produce. So, for example, the advertisers, their aim in this project is to make a poster inviting students to the recycling day. Okay, it also gives us some information about the equipment that they need. So using A3 paper, colors to create the poster. And what they also need to do, and this is a great thing, I think, before they make the poster, they need to go and talk to the other teams, because the other teams are going to have to tell them what they're doing for the event so they can actually put this on the poster. So this is a great way that teams can actually collaborate within each other. And this is just how we work as teachers. Teachers in the English department will quite often go and talk to teachers in the science department, for example, working between groups in order to accomplish something. And this is something we're doing right from primary level. Okay, it's not just a project. They are actually producing something and also collaborating with other groups towards a common goal here. Okay, and what we also have, of course, is their aim. So they're making a poster. What do they need to put on the poster? They need to think of a name for the event. They need to give information about what time the event is, using pictures, writing a description. What is the day going to be about, for example? So this is their role in this project. Okay, and they need to then put this poster up in the school, publicly present the poster to the rest of the classes so that everybody in the school knows about the event. Okay, another example, this is another team, the documentary team. Okay, what they need to do, they will be documenting the whole event. Okay, so they will have someone taking photos, making a video blog, recording the event, doing interviews with people, for example. Okay, what they also need to do, they need to talk to the other groups to get information about the event. Okay, so they can prepare some questions for people attending the event, for example. And after the event, they need to create a short presentation about the entire day, about what they did, about what they saw, about who they talked to, for example. So again, we can see how all of these projects, these mini projects, connect to one recycling day. And you have students working between groups, focused on tasks, again, realistic skills, things like informing other groups, collaborating, creativity, planning how they're going to approach different things. So this is how we can go about managing activities, helping students to understand what kinds of tasks they're going to do. Okay, and then of course, as the teacher, our role kind of changes a bit with PBL. We are not the center of knowledge. We're more a facilitator in this kind of situation. We're helping the students to kind of put them on track, put them on the path. So organizing follow-up sessions with each group, talking to each group. What have you done so far? Have you talked to the other groups, for example? What's your schedule? What are you going to be doing? Okay, so that way that you have some feedback with the students so that you can be on task, for example. And of course, you can monitor their progress. You can give them any kind of support that they need at the time. Okay, and of course, throughout all of this process, okay, students are going to be scaffolded. This process is happening while students are learning. Okay, the project-based learning part, it can take place throughout the lessons. It can take place, at various points during the lesson, for example. And at the same time, students are still learning the vocabulary about recycling, for example. They're looking at useful language. Okay, what kinds of things can you recycle? Okay, so all of this is taking place throughout the module. So students are learning more about the subject, more about the project as they go through the module. Okay, and finally, when we get to the actual public demonstration, as we get to the event, the day, the students recording the event, you can actually rewatch the video with your students, or you can have a discussion about the day. And then this is where you have the feedback as a class, asking the students about what they did, how they feel about the event, what they are happy with, what they think they can do better or differently next time, for example. And you have a nice way there to assess the students' learning, assessing the public product, and also getting students to reflect on what they did. Students here take more responsibility for their learning. They're able to reflect on what they did and feel good about the work that they have done in this project. So this is actually one of my favorite project-based learning tasks from our primary series. As you can see, it involves students doing a wide range of different tasks, combining different skills together. Within groups, you have different people working together, and even with different other groups, you have them coming together, feeding back to each other, sharing information, and then they're all working as a class to organize this event. Something I think is really good, and of course, a realistic event, something to do with recycling, something that's beneficial for the school. It's contributing in a positive way to the school as well. Okay, and this is a methodology that we've taken in our secondary levels as well. The same kind of thing, this time preparing a school charity food fair, for example. The same kind of thing, the students are preparing a charity day, a food fair. Okay, again, the students are going to be working in different groups. You have the food team, you have the reporters, for example, the accountants, the super chefs, and they're going to organize, run, manage the event between themselves. Okay, so once you have sort of one methodology for this, you can quite easily translate this into other levels as well. Okay, so these were just some ideas to show you. Again, I really wanted to focus here on the underlying methodology, how we begin by introducing the topic, how we then separate the students into different groups, how we then encourage the students to collaborate with each other, give them clear goals on what they need to do, and then they can sort of begin their inquiry, and all the time monitoring and having this feedback with the different groups. Okay, now that was one example of primary, and then we also saw a secondary level example of PBL. What I wanted to focus on next was how we can do this in higher levels, and also how we can do this from simply projects. Okay, we talked a bit earlier about project work and PBL and the differences. If you are doing a project, perhaps how can you take that to the next step? How can you maybe enrich or add to an existing project to make it more of a PBL approach? And this is quite a nice example here from one of our secondary titles. I think you might recognize that the task from earlier, we labeled this as a project, which indeed it is a project. Okay, think of a future invention. Okay, we have some decision here. The students can decide what invention they want. But here they're thinking about accommodation, transport, this kind of thing. It's not really very collaborative. There's not a lot of other things connected to that. However, we can add some PBL elements. Now with this task, we turn it more into a PBL focus. Use your ideas, use your invention to organize or present a competition about the future. Okay, so you're going to take your project and you're going to publicly exhibit this project at a competition about the future. This is where we can take some PBL elements and maybe add to our project. And this is a great example of how you can extend a project into PBL work with your students and get them to think about these projects in more detail. Okay, what do we have here? We have a student-directed task, students deciding about their future inventions. We have student voice and choice. The students are going to take whatever kind of approach that they want. They can prepare videos, a presentation, a poster about their future invention. And it's something real world. It's thinking about the future. It's thinking about something that would be useful for future generations. Students thinking about how they can perhaps make adjustments to transport, education, for example. And of course, we have the public presentation here with the competition. The students can demonstrate their idea to, again, the whole class, or you can involve different classes here and have a future event, a future competition where students present their ideas about the future as well. Okay, so we have lots of different elements here of PBL. And so how can we do this? Again, by following the same steps that we did before with primary, building the culture, introducing students to the idea of technology and how technology might affect our lives in the future, the importance of electricity, for example, the importance of looking after the environment, and how perhaps we can change our habits. Things like videos are great for doing this. At the beginning of the module, for example, besides just introducing the module and the vocabulary, it's also introducing this idea for the project work that's going to come later. Students don't know they're doing this project yet, but by playing the video at the beginning, we have some kind of ideas about what the students can use later on. Let's have a little look at the video.
What's next? Can we predict what will happen in our future based on the technology we have today? Will our bodies be part robot, part human? It is very probable. Even today, prosthetic robotic limbs and artificial organs, like hearts and kidneys, are being used on people who need them, and with great success. Will robots be doing a lot of jobs? A lot of industries today are using robots to manufacture products, such as cars, phones, and TVs. Robots are also used by doctors to perform operations and diagnose illnesses. Will holidaymakers be spending their holidays on other planets in our solar system? There already are websites where people can book expeditions in space. Although they are very expensive.
So you get the main idea. It's talking about technology, how the future might be different in the end. And of course, we have questions here, something to have this inquiry so that students are thinking about this kind of thing. How do you think technology will change the future? What kind of inventions might we have? So even from the beginning of the module, we are building this culture. We're introducing the topic of the project so that students are thinking about this. So that when it comes to the project work, they have some ideas to contribute, okay? Sustained inquiry, okay, throughout the module. Again, reflection on the question, thinking about the future. What will cities be like in the future? What kinds of features might a modern futuristic city have, for example? Things like recycling and producing energy, having driverless buses and taxis, for example. I think in the UK right now, they're actually demoing flying taxis, which is crazy. We even have little robots actually in my hometown in England that bring shopping to you now. You can actually order, and the robots have a GPS system. They're little carts that come and they deliver groceries. Very, very useful during the pandemic when we couldn't actually go to the supermarket. So even this is a reality now. And having students work on these kind of questions, again, it's sustained inquiry. They are doing meaningful research. They're learning about the topic as they go through the module. And of course, we have scaffolded learning, of course. Throughout the module, we're working on things like vocabulary. If we're talking about future inventions, if we're talking about what's life going to be like, we're going to be making predictions, for example. So what predictions do you think will or won't happen in the next 50 years, for example? Make some of your own predictions about the future, okay? What's going to happen with things like plants? Will they be able to charge our mobile phones, for example? Will we be able to connect to our phones, our cars even, for example? So these kinds of things throughout the module, again, scaffolded learning, vocabulary, grammar at the same time, making predictions, using future tenses, using conditionals, for example, okay, helping students, giving them the language support that they need to engage with the topic and also to produce the language at the same time. Okay, and of course, through managing activities, when we get to the actual competition itself, when we get to this public demonstration, we can actually have a wide range of different tasks connected to this competition. We might want to have students prepare a PowerPoint, for example, present their invention through our PowerPoint, design a competition poster, okay? As we saw in the previous project, designing the Recycling Day poster. So in groups, we might have a group that is, again, designing the poster. What's the name of the competition? When is it going to take place? They're going to inform the school. So a poster that can be put up around the school, again, a public demonstration here. Interviews with the contestants. Okay, so people that are presenting their inventions, We can have a group that actually prepare questions for these people, for the inventors even, okay, on the day, going around the different groups, asking the different inventors, what's your invention? Why do you think it's going to be useful? Do you think that you can win the competition, for example? This could be a nice idea to have students in different groups here working towards this. Again, another idea from the previous lesson with primary, creating some kind of video blog with students that, again, that are capturing the day, taking photos, making a video blog, preparing something, perhaps some kind of advertisement, a video to present the event, for example. And of course, some kind of class discussion or vote for the winners as well. This can lead into some kind of a debate, some kind of discussion about the different things. So from this one project, we have the competition that we can then branch out into a lot of different project work there. Lots of different groups here can be organized, working on different skills, creativity through the poster, communication, collaboration between different groups, working on things like using technology in the classroom, for example. And again, they're going to be using all of the language, the vocabulary, the grammar, different skills here to design, create and demonstrate their product to the rest of the class. So this is just an idea that I wanted to share with you today, an idea of how we can extend a project into a more PBL focus. As you see here, there are many different possibilities that you can take. Perhaps it's not possible to cover all of these in one lesson. However, you can do this perhaps over many different lessons and focusing on different parts of the competition if you wanted to. And these are just my ideas. Perhaps you have some of your own ideas from here of how you could organize this kind of event as well. That's the beauty of the project-based learning as well. It's not something that's completely fixed. The teacher can also add their own ideas, and of course the students can use their own skills and ideas throughout the process as well. Okay, so why PBL? I've got a few minutes left, so I'm going to finish so we can have some questions. Why PBL? Well, it's personalized and meaningful. It's focused on students' personalized and meaningful use of language, as we saw through the examples, through the methodology, helping students to understand these topics more deeply, rather than just learn about recycling is good because it helps the environment. Helping students to understand why it's important by helping their school to actively try and recycle, to explain to other students why they need to be recycling, for example, putting this into a realistic context, solving or approaching real world problems through real world experience. Okay, we saw the group work, the collaboration, the feedback between different groups, the time management as well. These all fall under 21st century skills development. Throughout this entire process, the students are working on a range of different 21st century and transferable skills that can be used in any kind of situation or any kind of job that they go into in the future as well. Think about our own jobs as teachers, the amount of collaboration and communication that we do, the creativity, the liaising with other departments that we have to do, the communication that we do with parents, with other teachers, with students. Okay. We have all of this. So that's something else to consider. Who is PBL aimed at? Everybody, I think. From these examples for primary, secondary, it's something that can be implemented at every level, especially for young learners. This is something that we can do if we do it in a careful, scaffolded way. If we use a clear and concise framework, we can help students to develop all of these different skills here, from self-discipline and responsibility, using their imagination, tapping into their creative skills, for example, helping them to actually retain long-term information. Through working on something like a recycling day event, the students are going to remember this more in more detail. They're going to have a closer connection with the topics, with the language, by actually doing this and presenting this and remembering the day. Okay, what do we have then in conclusion? I think that, of course, PBL, as we've seen throughout the presentation, it absolutely can be implemented at primary levels with the careful scaffolding and preparation. It can make use of authentic content for young learners, as we saw through the Recycling Day event. And it can help learners to develop, practice and apply real life skills. Again, as we saw, all of the 21st century skills covered. We had a wide range of different skills put into place, and it can be part of your teaching approach as well. So this is what I really wanted to show you today. I'm going to finish the presentation here because I'd like to hear your feedback today and if you have any questions. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. You've been a great audience. Thank you for the interaction as well. I really appreciate talking to you, even though it's just through the chat. And if you have any questions or any comments or any feedback, I'd be very happy to hear it from you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. It's always a pleasure. Really interesting topic. Now we have cleared, I know teachers have cleared the ideas about project-based learning and just project, right? And this is going to be very helpful for our sessions, for our classes. And of course, we have excellent comments for you, as always, in the chat box. It's always a pleasure to count on you. You always cooperate with us with this important process that we have as teachers, and we always need ideas, we need the strategies, we need to be updated. Thank you for this. Thank you for this, Daniel. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
It's always a pleasure for me as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so what else we have? What else we have? Let me continue sharing.
Yes, yes.
Okay, with you. Yes. Well, okay.
I think while you are searching for the next thing, Patricia,
yes.
Let me remind all the people here in the chat, here in the room, I say, that you must fill in the link. There was a link in order to get your certificates.
Of course.
Please. Yes, it's the last chance, the last chance.
Yes,
you have
the last chance for your certificate.
Yes, please, for your certificate. So I may, please, could you launch the link, please, again? Thanks. Okay, here we have the link for your certificates.
Okay,
please,
and here we have some news,
yes,
for
Patricia,
you. Yes, we would like you to share with parents. Okay, you know that every month we have these sessions with our dear parents. Okay, we have this cycle, Dialoguemos en Familia, and this month we have the topic, No hablo English. ¿Cómo puedo ayudar a mis hijos en casa? Okay, this was always a problem with parents because they were always asking for sending, right, the lists with the words, with the pronunciation, with the translation, with the meaning, with everything, which is not fair, right? So in this session, we are going to share important strategies and tips so parents can be involved in this process, not by interrupting the process of teaching, right? But helping their children at home. And this is going to be on June the 28th, okay? From 6 to 7 p.m., right? And what else? What is next? Okay, let's take some photos to remember this wonderful moment. Pictures, yes. Okay, turn on your cameras, please. Turn on your cameras so we can have this important moment. Oh, yes, wonderful faces. Aime, nos ayudas con las fotos, okay? Listo.
Okay.
Yes, Aime, okay, yes, there is always a link for the survey in the chat box, please. You know that your opinion is really important for us. Your opinion is really important. You are going to help us continue improving this service that we have with you. Okay, so you have a link for the survey. And now your camera's on. Okay, your camera is on for the picture, yes. Aime nos va a ayudar con las fotos y nos avisas en el momento que ya estemos.
Say cheese.
Todos ahí. Say cheese. Say Nutesa. Say happy anniversary.
Say hi. Say happy anniversary.
Yes.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah,
Una más.
Una más. Ahí estamos.
A ver.
Yes.
Listo.
Okay, so Lourdes, okay, we have to say goodbye. And
yes, Patricia, it's time to say goodbye. Okay, and to see you again next month. Yes, next month. And please to be in our in the next session we have for parents too, as Patricia told you. Yes, because it will be interesting to share with parents too. Thanks, Daniel. Daniel, before going, people is asking you for your email.
Oh,
Could you
of course.
write your email, please?
Of course.
In chat
Yes,
box,
yes.
yes.
Yes. Here it is.
Before saying goodbye, so Daniel will be in contact with you, dear teachers.
Okay, so here it is in the chat. Daniel@expresspublishing.co.uk. If you have any questions about today's session, please email me. I'd love to hear your comments. As teachers, I mean, one of my favorite things is meeting teachers from around the world. Obviously, we can't talk today face to face, which is a shame. But if you want to say anything about the presentation, if you have any questions, if you have any feedback, if you have any constructive feedback, I'm always available. So please send me an email.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Daniel.
Yes.
So unmute yourself to say goodbye. Yes.
See
we
you next
we want to
time.
listen to you.
See you next
Yes.
time.
Goodbye.
Another
See you.
session. See you next time.
Wonderful morning with you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Academy of Experts.
See you next time.
Take
Blessings.
care and blessings.
Blessings for all of you. Remember our 80th anniversary this year. Remember.
It's so interesting.
Happy
Feliz Día,
birthday.
papis.
Yeah, happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. Thank you. Thank you. Happy Father's Day. Okay, yes. Thank you so much. Remember, our virtual album for Father's Day is on the Facebook. You can see your students who had participated in our virtual album for Father's Day. Thank you. See you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Enjoy your weekend.
Bye.
Thank you.
You too.
Same to you.